Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Paul Hepfer, CEO of Project Open Hand, and I'm happy to be broadcasting live from our pandemic Project Open Hand studios at 730 Polk Street in San Francisco. We're really happy to have you here tonight. This is our second official book launch party, and it's a virtual book launch party, and we're really excited to have you all join with us. As many of you know, we're in the process of wrapping up celebrating a year, for the past year, celebrating our 35th anniversary. And we really wanted to do that in a special way this year as we celebrate 35 years of the legacy of Project Open Hand. We wanted to leave people with something to reflect back on our humble beginnings. And so we're really delighted to share with you tonight this keepsake hardbound book featuring the story of Ruth Brinker, our founder, and her legacy, but also it includes 15 recipes from prominent chefs, as well as several celebrities in the entertainment industry. And they've all been Project Open Hand supporters, and they were all happy to participate in this great book. So tonight we're going to hear from some of the folks that made this possible. We have some chefs we're going to hear from. We actually have the author of the book along with another special guest later on in the program. And after each segment, we have about 4 segments. After each segment, I'll be able to relay your questions to the people that we're presenting. So you have a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. It's a little different than the chat. We're going to use the Q&A function, and that will allow me to pass on your questions to our guest tonight. If this wasn't a COVID season presentation, we'd be here together at Project Open Hand having a nice informal conversation with about this great book. But we still hope that you have the feel that this is an open and inviting forum for you to ask questions and really share with us our legacy as we start to wind down our 35th anniversary. So with that, I'm really happy to introduce our first speaker tonight and presenter, Chef David Verzello. And David is joining us tonight from, David, I'm checking to see, from his own kitchen in Green Valley, Fairfield. And David grew up in Burlingame, San Francisco on the peninsula. And David lived in San Francisco during the formative years of Project Open Hand and worked in residential real estate. And he's known about us for a long time. And from what I understand, he's been a supporter and very, very committed to the mission of our organization. David was a self-taught chef, and he graduated top in his class at California Culinary Academy. And for the last 15 years, Chef David has led Tuscan cooking courses at an Italian villa outside Florence. And as soon as we're able to resume normal travel, he plans to resume offering his cooking classes at Barrow Salvatore Ferragamo's estate. And I know I butchered that, and he's offered for me to stay there for a while, and I can't wait to get there. Chef David and his husband, Patrick, live in Green Valley with their 2 dogs. And now I'm really happy and excited to turn the program over to Chef David. It's all yours, David.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Welcome to my kitchen here in Green Valley. I can't tell you how happy I was to be asked to participate in this program because, as Paul said, what I typically do is I work in Italy and I do these cooking classes, and this time of the year I'd be over in Florence teaching somebody rolling pasta, and I wasn't able to do that. So it was fantastic for me to be able to spend that time putting my efforts towards good and raising a little bit of money here for Project Open Hand. I was born and raised in San Francisco, been familiar with it. I actually, unfortunately, knew a lot of people who contracted AIDS and got sick and relied on the services of Project Open Hand back in the day. And I know firsthand from many people that I know that it was worked miracles and been there for people. So it has been my honor when I was asked to reach out to my friends, my celebrity friends, chefs, to come up with a set of recipes that were not in their wheelhouse, not their famous, fancy, celebrity chefy kind of things. These are the things, the kind of meals that they would prepare for their family if they were sick or their friends. For example, starting with cat cora, we have that. She gave us her Greek cinnamon stewed chicken. Kat is Greek by origin, and this is a family recipe of hers, and I know it's a personal recipe that she was really pleased to share. Little promo for her. She's going to be on the Food Network on Sunday night at 7 p.m. in the Tournament of Champions Kitchens on the Food Network. Check her out. After that, we had Tracy De Jardin, who you all probably know from Jardinier, the very exclusive restaurant in San Francisco. This is her homie grandmother Salazar's Avelina soup that she makes for her family. Moving on, a very good friend of mine, Marjorie Brewsker. She's actually come to Italy and cooked with me. Her family is from Italy, and I believe this is her father's recipe. And she made it for me in Italy, actually, and it's fantastic. It's a slow braised pork and cabbage. It's fantastic. It's in the book. Oh, and after that, another friend of mine from Italy, Salvatore Ferragamo. Yes, that's Salvatore Ferragamo. I actually do my cooking classes now in his villa, and it's fantastic. And his favorite recipe, which is also one of my favorite recipes, and we actually share this dish together a lot, are his braised beef cheeks. And they're best braised in his water, by the way. Moving on from there, another very good friend of mine, Leslie Zemeckis, known as an author, actress, director, producer, and her husband is Bob Zemeckis, by the way, the producer of Back to the Future and Forrest Gump. But she's also known as the Bacon Bitch. You saw her apron there and the thing. She doesn't mind me calling her that. She makes the most fabulous brownie, and that is the recipe for her brownie. And on the Back to the Future kind of theme, Christopher Lloyd, Doc Martin, and his wife Lisa Lloyd. Lisa was actually a volunteer here at Project Open Hand back in 91. I think she told me she actually used to deliver meals on Tuesday nights. And this is what she calls her Frenchiest French meal that she makes. And this is the meal that she makes for her friends with love at her home. And she's never made it for me at her home because every time I'm at her home, I cook for her. But anyway, now I guess we want to open it up to any questions. I can't.
David, I'll start out one. You know, we did a similar event last week, and you actually prepared a few meals for us, and I was just fascinated by the fact that you were able to pull all these people together. So how did you convince people to actually participate in this great book edition?
Almost everybody's in this area has heard of Project Open Hand. I mean, it is an institution of note, and all of these people are friends of mine. I've either worked with, cooked for, hang out with, drink with, right? All of these people. And during this time of COVID, we've all of us chefs had a little bit of extra time, and we all also understand the need. And so I think that everybody was really happy to help.
I was also amazed how quickly it came together. It was a pretty short period of time to pull off getting all those recipes for the author to write the book, to print the book. I found out during the process that there was actually back order on printing of books. So that was quite a challenge in and of itself. David, do you have your own cookbook?
Yes, I do. And I was supposed to have it here to show you, and I forgot to get it ready. But yes, it's called 6 Nights, 1,000 Bites, which is for my cooking school, which is 6 nights in Italy. And so I kind of walk through the steps of all of what you would do in Italy if you were with me for a week. And I actually just finished writing a memoir, which will be coming out. Get ready for that for Christmas, I would believe.
Okay, we'll be able to advertise it at that time.
Okay.
So, David, also we had a great question here about the process for selecting the different types of menus in the cookbook. How did did you ask people to come up with those items, or how did you give them guidance?
Well, I think the open hearts food, and the idea behind the book was food is a gift and a gift of love. and it's a very intimate thing. So we left just kind of open to that interpretation. What if you were making, what food represents a gift of love to you, for whatever reasons, you know? And that's what they all came down to, very simple, kind of homey recipes that you could see your grandmother making. I mean, almost every single one of them.
Yeah, that's great, and so aligned with our theme here at Project Open Hand too. That's really great.
And my recipe, actually, the one that I did is my sauce or gravy, or in Italy we call it bolognese or sugo, or is the recipe that was my mother's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was my version of my mother's. And the story with that is, when I actually had a moment when I could have used a Project Open Hand, not for HIV, but I had something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I was paralyzed from head to toe for a year. And if it were not for all these little tubs of my mother's gravy or sauce that she had in my freezer, I probably wouldn't have gotten through that time as easily.
David cooked that bolognese gravy sauce for us last week live, and it just looked amazing. I can't wait to try it myself when I have the time. It really looked great. All right, well, David, we really appreciate you being with us 2 weeks in a row, and more importantly, all the work you did to put this book together for us. It's really, we're going to treasure it forever.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you. It's been an honor.
Great, thanks a lot, David. All right, now I'm gonna introduce our next guest tonight, our very own Chef Adrian Barrow from Project Open Hand. Adrian and I bump into each other every couple days. He's so busy in the kitchen all days, and I'm normally upstairs. And it's been great to see him throughout this last pandemic, and all he had to do to get the kitchen. Really the increased production that we went through during COVID-19. So I think you might be touching a little bit on that, Adrian, but more importantly, I'm just really glad to have you here. Adrian is featured in the cookbook. So Adrian, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it from here.
Hello there. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adrian Barrow, and I am the executive chef here at Project Open Hand. So I appreciate you all joining us here this evening to celebrate this launching of Ruth Brinker's Legacy Cookbook. I have been with the agency cooking in various positions for the past 12 years. Oddly enough, I first entered the building at 730 Polk Street, which I was supposed to be there right now, as a client many years ago on the behalf and advice of my doctor. Walking in that day, I stopped by the kitchen to chat with the chef with my resume in hand, knowing full well that there was a position that was available and the position I wanted. We hit it off, talking about food, what else? And later that week, I was offered the position as a special diet chef at Project Open Hand. As a client, some of my favorite Project Open Hand meals included, of course, the fabulous and famous baked mac and cheese. Others were the beef bourguignon, pork lentil stew with bacon, meatloaf with mashed potatoes, and chicken thighs with creamy polenta and glazed carrots. And there were many, many others. These meals did exactly what I believe Ruth Brinker intended them to do. They saved lives like mine, providing me with the high protein and calorie-rich meals that my body needed back then. Also helping to boost my appetite, which was often missing during those times. Those favorite meals work, not just for me back then, but for countless others. And today, Project Open Hand continues to produce medically tailored meals that do the same thing. Building on Ruth's legacy and her great work, we have continued to provide medically tailored meals, offering as many as 7 different diets to chronically ill clients with various conditions and seniors across the Bay Area. Our registered dietitians, the nutritionists, myself, my team of chefs, and other kitchen operators, we all collaborate on creating delicious menu items. And one thing comes to mind often, our new dish, chicken chiloquiles, was recommended by one of my cooks. It was her mother's favorite dish, and she taught it to her just so she can teach me how to cook it. So this is a real collaboration, everybody. All this collaboration, we always make sure that we're providing a third of the daily nutritional requirements for our senior adults and all our clients. Always with an emphasis on using lean proteins, high fiber and whole grain products, and vitamin and oxidant-rich vegetables and other products in our meals. This process continues with the help of many volunteers who come in daily to help us with prep work, like chopping carrots and other vegetables, dicing tofu or whole wheat tortillas for that chilaquiles, or racking fresh proteins like chicken thighs, breast, trout, or even pork chops to be cooked in our bank of ovens or in our braisins by a team of chefs. Over the past year, especially over this pandemic, our volunteers have continued to support us by helping to portion each of those meals. Over an average of 62,000 medically tailored meals at the height of the epidemic were sealed in our kitchen, compared to about 21,000 meals per month during the previous and recent years. 7 days a week, they all showed up. And all those individual medically tailored meals are stored in one of our 6 walk-in freezers and our basements on the first floor and on the second and third floors. They were later consumed by our clients, but before that, the volunteers again would assemble them into 7 packs of frozen meals, famously known as 7-pack of frozen meals. These meals are then later volunteered and distributed by volunteers and our drivers across the city. This past year, more than ever, it became apparent not just to us and everyone at Project Open Hand that our medically tailored meals were much more needed by a larger community than we had ever imagined, than we had ever knew existed. And we were more than happy to help, especially during this time of need. All that effort goes into making new favorite meals. They're more healthy, more heart healthy, I should say, more nutritious. And some of them are examples are roasted tofu with vegetable jambalaya, which is a vegetarian meal. It proves that vegetarian meals can still be nutritious and tasty, right? But me being a mac and cheese person at heart, I was more than happy to share with you and many clients and volunteers this recipe that I came across when I first came to Project Open Hand. It was one of those favorite meals that made me fall in love with all the meals provided by Project Open Hand. While eating our mac and cheese here, I would always remember my mom's cooking, especially baked mac and cheese, this particular baked mac and cheese. Those times I would always be in the kitchen. I would be tasting every component along the way, sticking my fingers into every pan, every bowl before she could wash it. I learned other things too, dicing vegetables, but most of all, I learned about love and love of food and love of cooking. By the time she was finished, I would have eaten a full portion. Then she would bake that beautiful mac and cheese where I would have another portion. And she would always say, son, you never make too much mac and cheese. There's always time for leftovers. And she was right. The second helping and the third helping was even more delicious than the next. So from our kitchen here at Project Open Hand, please enjoy mac and cheese. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Here you go.
Difficult time. Can you hear me okay now, Adrian?
I can hear you now. Right, yes, I can.
Yeah. Yes. What would be a virtual presentation or get together if someone didn't say you're on mute or can you hear me? So I just wanted to make sure I got that out of the way. So, you know, Adrian, we're about 15 days away from the shelter-in-place order, from a 1-year anniversary of the shelter-in-place order. I remember it really well. I think it was March 17th. My 1-year anniversary was March 18th. So that was my 1-year anniversary. And, you know, I recall talking to other similar food organizations from around the country, particularly on the East Coast and other places that had experienced COVID before. And, you know, some of them were saying, you know, asking whether or not they are essential businesses. How is that being determined? How are we determining that here? And for us, I think to the one here at Project Open Hand team, we didn't wait for anyone to tell us we are essential. We said, we're essential. We're going in. We're going to do things that we've done for years, and we're going
to do it.
Too. So what was, can you reflect back to the mood in the kitchen during the first few weeks of COVID-19? Because I know it just must have been incredibly stressful, but in a way, you know, just this added sense of responsibility on you all.
It was definitely stressful those first few weeks. I mean, every day was a different day. For us chefs and people in the food business, every day is a different day. So it was nothing new, it was normal. But every day making considerations, making adjustments, because we had to keep updated with the new guidelines, making sure everybody was safe, not just the workers and staff, but the volunteers, knowing that there was people outside who were still need to be fed every day. Those orders kept coming in every day as the numbers grew for us. Things became tighter, more challenging. But the volunteers and staff together seemed more determined than ever. Everybody was very adaptable, easy to work with for some unknown reason, because they knew there was like another mission for us to reach. We had another drive coming. There was another reason for us to come to work again. And even with the close down at that time, volunteers just arrived from all across the Bay Area. It was amazing. And I always tell people when I'm speaking to them about my work is that one of the good things about COVID was getting to meet all those new faces of volunteers who showed up to help us when we needed. Even to the point where we had to start turning away volunteers because we had too many people to keep safe. So that was an amazing experience. And we stepped up and we fulfilled that challenge easily, I should say.
And I think I you know, personally, I can say that I felt that too, that even if you and I didn't interact, we probably didn't even see each other every week, but there was something that I just knew. I think we all trusted each other as a team of 130 employees, that we all knew that we were all doing what we needed to do to keep this rolling. And it was really a pretty powerful feeling.
And the comforting thing that we keep reminding ourselves is that this was something we had already done over the years. It was what we did every day. It was a little bit more urgency to what we were doing, but we were in our comfort zone really for the most part.
Yeah.
That made it easy.
Yeah. It was I don't want to overstate it, but it coming out on the other side now. I mean, so many of us have been vaccinated. We know how to keep safe. We knew how to keep distancing. You all knew how to switch menus and from hot to frozen. And we do feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And what do you think your team in the kitchen will take away from this?
I think the one thing I hope they take away is that they can work as one, as a family, not just a unit or a group of people cooking to deliver healthy meals, but they work more as a family together, and they actually had each other's back for the most part. Not just the staff, but they reach out and other people on the outside reach back in and took their hand and supported us. So that was comforting. I hope they learned that there's love around food.
Yeah, that's great. One last question for you, Adrian.
Yes.
You're from Barbados.
Yes,
Is there a favorite food that you have from your home island? And I bet you get asked that a lot.
Yes, if it comes with a side of mac and cheese, I would eat almost anything. But curry oxtail stew with a side of mac and cheese. Don't forget the mac and cheese.
Okay, oxtail with mac and cheese. Okay, will you make that for me sometime?
Yes, anything with the mac and cheese.
Very good.
Baked mac and cheese.
All right, Adrian, so good to see you. Hope you're recovering. Look forward to seeing you soon. And really, thanks for being with us tonight.
It's a pleasure being with you. I owe my legacy to Ruth also, so we just build on that.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next, I have the pleasure to introduce our final two speakers tonight. And this is really exciting because the first guest that I'm going to introduce was not our first, our second executive director of Project Open Hand, but by far the longest tenured executive director that Project Open Hand has ever had. And I can't even tell you exactly how many years he served as executive director. And if I could reach half of that, I'll feel good about myself. After this last year, we'll see how that goes. But I'm really excited to have Tom Nolan with us tonight. As I mentioned, he's very long-term executive director who knew Ruth really well. And he's interviewed in the book. And so to that end, our second guest that's going to do this segment together is Sean Elder, the author of the Ruth Brinker biography that's in the cookbook tonight. And so Sean and I had a brief opportunity to meet each other right before we started the book process. We met each other virtually, of course, and he developed a list of people who we wanted interviewed for the book, and we talked about important people, how to find people. We did a little PI work to track down. We knew how to find Tom. He wasn't hard to find, but there were some other folks that took a little bit of effort. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean and Tom, and they're going to talk about the book and some of their experiences with it and some great insight about the legacy of Project Open Hand. So take it away, Sean and Tom.
All right. Well, as a way of setting up Tom here, because when I was doing this book, which was a joy to do because everybody who knew Ruth loved Ruth, and everybody who hadn't known Ruth were inspired, as Chef Adrian just said, by her legacy and her example. But when I started doing that early work of trying to figure out who it was essential to talk to, a couple of names came up, and the first was Tom Nolan. Everyone said, "Oh, you've got to talk to Tom. He's the guy. He knew her. He was here during the best years." He just touched a lot of people, and Tom in particular had the memories and the experience of Ruth as a living person, and I only got to know her through interviews and reflections. So maybe you can tell us a little bit, Tom, about how you came to Project Open Hand and what you knew about Ruth before you came there.
Sure. Well, I was a member of the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors from 84 to 90, well, 92, I guess. And they had a search committee. I knew that Steve Burns, who was the executive director for a couple of years, had left. His partner was from New York and was very sick with AIDS, and he wanted to be back there. And so they did a nationwide search, and I thought about it, and I thought, well, my entire food experiences, I was a busboy and a waiter and a bartender. That didn't seem to qualify me for doing this, but the committee actually called me, and that's what I was interested in. I interviewed for it, and I was offered the job, and I was delighted to be there. The first year as supervisor, I guess it was 1986 or so, San Mateo County was going to begin an AIDS program. And so we thought we would come into San Francisco and meet with some of the AIDS organization's leaders. That included the AIDS Foundation, and Shanti, and also Project Open Hand. So I knew Ruth since 1986, and we became friends. And I realized that when I got there that she was such a treasure to the organization, such a powerful symbol of the whole mission of food with love for people, with AIDS. So she came into a lot of our functions, and she was always a joy. A twinkle in her eye, and usually wearing a bright red suit. So she got the first big grant for our building, the building over on 17th Street. She went into a corporate headquarters for somebody, and she was sure they'd get the money. I said, "How could you deny a little old grandmother in a red suit feeding sick people?" And that was the beginning of it, really. So.
Yeah, that's good. And a lot of the stories I'd heard from people who had met Ruth at dinner parties in San Francisco before Project Open Hand was even started, because she has gotten this notion herself to start feeding people when she realized people were dying, not just of AIDS, but of malnourishment. In some cases, were literally starving to death. So she was going out and trying to do this on her own. And one gentleman I spoke to had been to a dinner party where someone said, "Oh, this woman's coming. She's trying to start this thing." And he said, "What can I bring?" And he said, "Bring your checkbook." And that's how she worked. I mean, she would go to these small gatherings and convince people, whatever it took. Yeah, the best stories I heard involved her going into bars, to gay bars. And again, just sort of saying, the city needs help. Your brothers need help. This is a crisis. No one else is going to do it. Of course, the government was ignoring it entirely at the time. And she would go into the cigar box and collect money from people and then take it out and like throw it in the boot of her car and use that to buy vegetables the next day, which I think drove some people in accounting crazy later. But yeah, she was good at the ask, it sounds like. I can't hear you, Tom. I seem to have lost Tom's sound here. It looks like you're muted, Tom. Was that by accident? Did you accidentally mute yourself, perhaps?
Possible. Yes.
Oh, there you go. Now I hear you.
What'd you say?
Oh, no, I was just, you saw her in person. You saw her going out and doing that difficult work that you talked of getting people to contribute. And I'm curious about that, because I think one of the reasons that she still inspires people is, you know, AIDS was the crisis at the time, but we've seen lots of crises since then, the last year or two in particular. And I know people get overwhelmed and they feel like there's nothing they can do. And here was one individual who said, well, I can do something.
Yeah, she truly believed in the mission of the organization, powerful and compelling vision that is with the organization to this day. You know, Meals with Love for persons, at that time, persons living with HIV and AIDS. And, you know, the crisis was so severe in the late 80s and early 90s, actually until 1996, when protease inhibitors came along, that, you know, you really couldn't walk around San Francisco anywhere without seeing these skinny little emaciated people. They looked like they'd come out of a war concentration camp. I mean, it really looked that bad. And lesions all over it. And you simply had to do something. And Ruth came up with this thing, so very simple for people to do. You could either come in and volunteer, or you could write a check. And she was not afraid to ask for it. And, you know, I wasn't either. I didn't think it was hard to raise money for Open Hand those days. Paul may disagree, but just because the cause is so in our face in those, you know, early days, that, you know, you had to give, you had to do something. And if all you could do is write a check, God love you, come on, do it. And so we had a huge base of support in the community. And she just symbolized that so well. I mean, she really did. She was in all the gay day parades. She marched on Market Street with her parasol. And then she had a car and, you know, all that. She went to the gay bars and, you know, all over town. She was everywhere. And I think that's what attracted people, you know, to her personally, her vision. And she believed in it so much. It was so compelling. Certainly was and is to this day.
Yeah. And did you yourself get pressed into service? I've heard stories from people who said, I think Jim Illig was the one who told me that he just got there. He was trying to raise money through the government and grants and things. He'd been working on a grant, and there'd be someone would come over the loudspeaker and say, some volunteers didn't show up. We need people to go out and deliver food. It's like, wait a minute, that's not my job. Did that ever happen to you?
Oh, yes. My partner of 43 years, Larry Friesen, we delivered meals. I recall one day in particular, between Market and I guess Folsom Street, we delivered 70 meals, the two of us. And they're all hot meals. We go into these SROs down there, and oh my, you know, the shaky old elevators, you know, just people really sick. And yeah, I delivered a lot. In fact, at one point, I made a promise to deliver on every single route in the city. So I did, you know, and it was a way to just see what the work was all about. And I used to tell the staff and, you know, volunteers that, you know, some days are very hard for all kinds of reasons. But at the end of every day, we knew we were doing something very good and very important. And I could help tell those stories to the larger public. It's a compelling vision. This is something that touches deep in your heart. And it's so simple and basic, but I think that's part of the, you know, of the magic of it, really.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit about how Project Open Hand expanded its mission, when that happened and why? Because you went from serving people afflicted with AIDS and HIV to suddenly breast cancer, and all kinds of other populations were being helped.
Well, what happened is we bought the building on Polk Street and had a capital campaign, raised $7.5 million for it, and to renovate the first 2 floors, the kitchen and the grocery center and all of that. But we had a lot of space there. And we wanted to rent it out. We were willing to rent it to anybody almost. But luckily, Shanti came along, a very similar mission to ours, and also the Asian Pacific Islander Wellness Center. And so you know, very soon that building became, more people living with HIV and AIDS in San Francisco came to that building than the other building in the city. And so that helped, you know, helped pay the rent, of course. But then what happened is the Salvation Army was providing a lot of senior meals in the city. 22 different sites, decided that they were not going to go along with the city's domestic partner benefits. So they turned in their contract, and we bid on them, and we won. All of a sudden, we're in the senior business. And at first, quite frankly, it was a contract, but in very little time, it became very much a part of who we are, our mission. And then in 1996, the protease inhibitors started making a big change in people's lives. Thank God that happened. And we knew there were other people suffering with cancer and heart disease and all kinds of things. But according to our strict mission at that time, we really couldn't serve them. But the question came down to is if we could, without harming their basic mission of feeding people with AIDS and HIV, why wouldn't we? I used to tell a story about a client, I used to call it Room 22, one of these SROs, delivering meals. And that person, they all had AIDS at that time, but for somebody in the building with cancer. And why wouldn't we if we could? And Ruth was terrific at that. She really, actually, she always expected at the time that Open Hand would be around for a couple of years. Same thing, Margaret Heckler, who was the Reagan's health secretary. She thought it was going to go away too. So Ruth thought there'd still be a need for it because of people with, heart disease, diabetes, and all these other things. And so she was very, very supportive. It was pretty controversial at the time, though. There was some thought that we were abandoning the gay community, we were abandoning people with AIDS and all of that. But we weren't, and we told the story. We did lose a few volunteers, not very many really, but we had a number of town hall meetings and explained why we were doing it. But it really came down to that question, if we can, without sacrificing people living with HIV and AIDS, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't you do that? And we were the first in the country to do that. It was very controversial among our peers all around the country. And eventually, I think everybody has decided to do it as well. Again, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? It's part of the mission, And I always thought my job at Open Hand was primarily what I used to call the exegetical function. What exactly does that mission that Ruth articulated in 1985 for the first time, what does that mean in 1990, 95? The conditions all changed, but the heart of the mission is the same. Meals with love. Chef Adrian spoke brilliantly to that, of course, and Paul as well. And that's the magic of the organization, Be willing to change, but never, ever abandon the fundamental mission of it. So.
Yeah, I had, most of the people I spoke to were, as I said, people like yourself, who are the new Ruth, or people who have been volunteering there for a long time because of her example. But I did talk to a younger volunteer, Hua Su, and I'm sure I'm butchering his name, but he's been there for like 9 years. I'm guessing by looking at him, he's probably in his late 30s, 40s, something like that. But he's HIV positive himself. And he said the example of Ruth for him was the example of somebody not letting fear get in the way of offering help. Because in those early days of AIDS, as you well remember, people didn't know how it was spread. People didn't know how it was transmitted. There was incredible paranoia about it. And people constantly asked Ruth, like, boy, is it safe what you're doing? Is it okay? She's like, I'm helping people. How can this be bad? So I think there's a little bit of that DNA that goes through the organization, including the incredible work that y'all did during this current pandemic.
Well, I remember going in a hospital room in probably 87 or 88, having to wear a gown and mask and gloves and all of that, which is, don't touch anybody, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, what she was doing was incredible, given that the milieu in which it was formed. People were afraid to touch anybody. I mean, some of our clients, been kicked out of their homes because they were gay and they got AIDS. And, they never heard from their family until they died. They came to clean out the apartment or something. And so the courage factor is very important, and she exemplified that. If a little old grandmother, she called herself, she could be doing this stuff, you can too. And that was the vision, that was the message, and she articulated it very well.
Yeah, that was the other thing that I heard from a lot of people, is this sense that people had come to San Francisco to be themselves, to be gay in their case, and a lot of them had been disowned, but in some cases literally disowned by their families, couldn't call on them for support. And these people who had made up their new family, their new community, were the ones who were reaching out to help them. And that, to me, is a real San Francisco story. I think that's part of what makes Project Open Hand bigger than just the organization itself.
It was a real community. Actually, it still is through all these years. People some volunteers have been there for 25 years. I mean, it's amazing. We used to have a volunteer appreciation party. People even back then had been there 25 years already. And the group would come in on Tuesday mornings or Wednesday, whatever day, to work in the kitchen of the grocery center. And they became very close. And they still are to this day. I've actually been invited to a few things with them. And it just brought them together. They never would have known each other otherwise. And it was a wide variety of San Franciscans involved in this, gay and straight, rich and poor, young and old, famous and struggling, and all of that. So it was really powerful. It just felt good to be there. To be among them with Ruth as the inspiration.
Yeah. And not to dig up old skeletons, but I know that before you came on as executive director, Ruth had left. She'd had a disagreement with the board. I think she'd been invited to leave by the previous board, the previous CEO, and had gone off and tried her own thing, this urban gardens thing, which was actually very interesting and probably ahead of its time. But it sounds like part of your mission was to bring her back into the fold. Is that true?
Well, I can't tell you how many times I was told in the early days that I didn't like what you did to Ruth. Of course, I wasn't anywhere near it at that time. And I knew she was such an asset, to the organization. She would come into the lunchroom and people stand up and give her standing ovation. She came over a lot. I guess I was at a point in my life where I was, I recognized that, and it was not intimidated by it in any way. That she was, she was a star. I mean, she was in Time magazine, New York Times, and all this stuff, and on TV a lot, and that's fine. So I recognized that, and I know it was a hard time for her when she left. But she did come to some things, and hand-to-hand luncheons and a few things like that. But I had her there quite a bit, and every time it came an important decision, like the decision to buy the building, like the decision to start serving seniors, and people who are critically ill, I always went to her and we talked about it. And having her blessing on it was extremely important, not only to me, but to others as well. Not only did she do that, people knew that she was doing that. And so she's the most remarkable person I've ever met in my life. I was actually privileged to be with her the day she died. She died at a nursing home over on Geary Boulevard, and Bob Brenneman, our development director, and I heard about it, went over that day and sat by her bed. She didn't know we were there, but it was a very powerful moment, seeing this incredible person getting ready to pass. And she was a strong Buddhist, and she a good soul in every way. So I was glad to be with her that day as well. And we had a wonderful service in City Hall. We had the mayor come and speak, and Gay Men's Chorus was there, and several hundred people came to it. It was just really a loving tribute to an extraordinary woman. Can I say something about the book before we leave? I've actually I'm talking to the audience now, not to you.
Oh, okay.
I've already told Sean this. The book is extremely well written, and it's really evocative of those times. And a wide variety of voices are in it. So I'd recommend everybody to get a copy of it and to read it. You just remember so much those early times. And if you didn't know her, you will feel that you know her as a result of this. I told Paul the book, I read the text of the book, and I'm just very proud to be part of that, and really glad you're doing this.
Well, thank you. I'm flattered. Paul, do we have any questions or?
Yes, we do, and I have a couple too. Sean, for you, we were planning to do a book like this way before COVID. Amor and I had talked about Amor Santiago, our Vice President of Development and Community Affairs, started in January, and we talked about a lot of different things about how to celebrate our 35th anniversary. We had parties planned. We wanted to do block parties and everything. And one of those things was, well, maybe we could do a book, a biography about Ruth Brinker. And by the time we got around to planning it, COVID had already hit, and we were all just really overwhelmed and anxious about this new pandemic. So for you, Sean, how do you, and we've made some comparisons, and I know we have to be careful about comparing pandemics, but at the same time, we all acknowledge that there were some comparisons. So for you, how is writing this book different for you, Sean? Do you think, as opposed to if you were writing this in another year that was just our 35th anniversary?
Well, I probably would have done more interviews in person rather than using this format. But there's something about celebrating the legacy of a person, of trying to dig in. It's sort of like that Citizen Kane thing, you know, where it's like there's a mystery at the heart of it. How do you find out who's got the threads that are going to make you understand this person better? Because everyone would agree she was remarkable. She did great work. I mean, Mother Teresa came and to San Francisco and said nice things about her. It's like, okay, you've got a saint. Saints are very hard to write about. What made her an actual person? And I think it was really talking to Tom, but also talking to her daughter, Lisa, who may be here tonight. I don't know. I can't really see the audience, but she said she might be looking in. And Lisa gave me a little bit of an idea of her mother before she came to San Francisco. And she was somebody who came from Kansas and moved to Los Angeles. And at a time in the early 60s when California was in a very interesting place, and it kind of opened her mind to a lot of things. She read the Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, and she read Aldous Huxley. And it was just kind of tuning into a different wavelength that was happening at the time. And I think by the time she got to San Francisco, when things were exploding, she understood that there was something interesting going on. And there a lot of these people who were much younger than her weren't used to somebody who looked like their mother or their grandmother being supportive of it. She ran a little antique store over on North Point, and hippies would come in and talk to her. So I think by the time Lisa told me she took her to Fillmore or the Avalon to see Janis Joplin and the light shows, you know? So here was somebody who was open-minded. So I think with that open-mindedness came a tolerance and an open-heartedness when there was a crisis in the gay community.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, I have a question. I think it could be for either one of you. Tom, you talked a little bit about the capital campaign when you moved into 730 Polk. And I understand, if this is correct, that at some point in time, Robin Williams was a donor that helped with a matching gift. First of all, is that correct? And also, how did you work on engaging the community and really rallying behind that?
Well, actually, he came in. The important thing about Robin Williams' gift, he had been a supporter before in the event, but we had a deadline to raise the money from the Kresge Foundation. We had to do it by a certain date. It was 2 years, I think, and we were short, so we did almost a telethon. Actually, it was a telethon, and we're just calling everybody. And then the word came that Robin Williams and his wife had contributed $25,000. It wasn't the first time, though. There was a Sur La Table on Maiden Lane had a program one night with chefs paired with celebrity types, and Robin's wife was the celebrity, and he was there. He spent 3 hours talking to everybody, just talking to anybody about anything they want to talk about. Just very gentle, very humorous, human guy. But the campaign was very well run by our development director at that time, Diana Coleman, who just did a terrific job in getting it out there. One of the things I had to do is ask people for a contribution, a specific contribution. Going to people and say, I'd like you to consider a gift of $1 million, which I did. And people usually fall off their chair or something, but they'd come around and do it, And so we did the big gifts first, like I said, that traditional capital campaign. And then we set it out broader to the community. Kresge finished up the last 10% of the thing, which is $750,000. We went to one woman came over one day, and she came over with her financial advisor. We gave her a tour of the building. It wasn't finished yet, and talked to her about it. And at the end, I said, she had given us like $25,000 a year for a long time. And so I said, I'd like you to consider a gift of $250,000. Well, she said, I'll consider it. The next day, her financial advisor left a voicemail. She's going to give you $1 million. Like, wow. we listened to that email that voicemail over and over again. And so I went to her house. She's a very, very modest person. And I said, can you tell us why you gave us the money? And she said, because I have it. I said, I have it. I like your mission. I have it. And that's it. And she never wanted to be acknowledged at all for what she did. We went back a year later, and we brought her back over to see the kitchen was up and running and all of that, and didn't ask her for anything. Thought that'd be kind of pushy on our part. The next day she came up with another $750,000. So Paul, I might give you her name someday, I don't know. But it was just one gift led to another. And I didn't find it very hard to do that, except for one person who was a very close personal friend that I asked for $1 million. Gave us $350,000, pretty good. So Diana and I would get in the car and go travel all over the area. In those days, there was nothing like the wealth search, or what it's called now, where you can go and check and see how much money somebody's giving to someone. We just had a guess. I would think, oh, they could probably do, you know, 700,000 or whatever it was. And we were usually right, except one, a board member led us to one place where he asked for $10 million. And we thought that was a stretch, and it was. He gave us 10,000, but we're happy to get it.
Left a couple of zeros off. Huh?
And the wall there, as you come in open hand, the names on the plates. That's a tribute to all those people. A wide variety of people gave an awful lot of money for that, and actually show up in the building and bringing them over and having lunch with clients and volunteers. That's a powerful thing.
Yeah. That and that's something that struck me in my almost 2 years here is the volume of individual checks that we get from people from all over the country, not even people that are in our service area, but and that's part of what legacy means, really. We talked about it with Adrian in the previous segment about how we really leaned on Ruth's legacy and her spirit, I think, during COVID. And I think that legacy not just helped us get through this pandemic and serve people, but clearly the outside community understands it too. I mean, we had 2,000 new donors just this year alone because they know we're here doing what we do.
Well, one of the early events that really helped Project Open Hand get recognized was the earthquake in 1989. From that little kitchen over on 17th and Bryant, they're working 24 hours a day, churning out 10,000 meals a day. They're feeding firefighters and earthquake victims and, first responders and all of that. They got a lot of media attention. That was a really helpful thing. I think COVID's the same thing for Open Hand now these days.
Yeah. One last question for you, Sean. I assume this is the first book you've written where you've done 100% of your interviews virtually. How is that different for you to interview people you've never met and to not be able to sit down in person with them?
Well, I like the body language you get from people when you're in person. A lot of the people I was speaking to weren't that comfortable doing Zoom interviews, to be honest, either because they weren't familiar with the technology, or in some cases they were too familiar with it. And it just like, I've been on Zoom all day long. I do not want to do another Zoom interview. In some cases, I think people were worried about their appearance. And I'd say, hey, you can turn your camera off. It really doesn't matter. So there was a little bit of that. But I think as with anything else, I'd always prefer to interview someone in person than on the telephone. But once you've established a little bit of a rapport, once you both agreed that the person you're talking about and the subject of your interview is actually fascinating, all of that goes away. And, in fact, my only regret is that I didn't get to talk to people like Tom more than once, because usually by the second time I've interviewed someone, it's like old home week. It's like, oh, you're back. Let's get back to what we were talking about. So, and again, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of shared love for Ruth and Project Open Hand's mission. And that comes out of the conversations.
Well, you were very easy to talk to. You asked good questions. I'd say the writing was terrific in the book. You got to read it.
I agree. And, one of the first things I noticed when I moved into this office, like I said, almost 2 years ago, there were a couple Project Open Hand cookbooks, and I have them here in my bookshelf. And I was thinking, I wonder how many of those are out there, and they've been around quite a while. And I'm just certain now that this book, Sean, that you and Tom and everyone else helped us create, is going to be around for a long time. It's a great biography. We have Ruth's story all in one place now. We have some timeless recipes in here too. I mean, really, these recipes, like David said, they've been passed down, and there's no reason that people won't make those for years and years to come. So with that, I'm gonna, and I should tell people how to get one. We had a question from someone about, well, how do I get one of these? A lot of people already have them during the hand-to-hand event. some of our donors that made donations or in the silent auction, they were able to pick up one of the first printing of the book. But we do have more. If you go to our website, you can make a donation and we'll send you one of these. And we'll have them available. And if we need to print more, we'll print more, because I think it's something that all of our supporters should have a copy of this book. So we're really, once again, Tom and Sean, thank you so much for.
Thank you for your leadership in the organization.
Great, thank you. And you two can stay on if you like, but I'm gonna say thanks to everyone else who was with us tonight. Really appreciate you joining us. Like I said, the One Cause page at the Project Open Hand website can direct you how to pick up a copy of these. And in the next few months, as things open up more and more in our community and more people are getting vaccinated, we really want to welcome people back into our kitchen and back into volunteering in any way. And we really, really appreciate all you've done for us, not just this past year during COVID, but for the past 35 years. So thank everybody. We have a survey that we're going to leave you with. If you'd like to fill out, that always helps us. We believe in evaluation and we believe in science, and we want to improve on what we do. So if you'd like to participate in the survey, we'd really appreciate that. Thanks again, and have a good night, everybody.